Hi, Mason. This is Nana. I have a new story for you. I've been wanting to read this to you for quite some time. This is my favorite story ever. I hope you like it. The Dragon's Red Wagon. Every night before Hector the dragon fell asleep, he wished 77 times for a red wagon. Every morning he jumped up and looked around to see if his wish had been granted. One morning he felt particularly hopeful and searched behind every boulder and bush in the forest. When at last he was sure that there was no red wagon, he slumped down beneath a tall redwood tree and began to cry. Gigantic tears rolled down his scaly green nose. "Excuse me," piped a small voice from somewhere near Hector's big toe. "I do hate to bother you, sir, but you're drowning me." "What?" Hector peered through tear-blurred eyes. "Where are you?" he inquired timidly, for, as dragons go, Hector was unusually shy. "Here," replied the voice, and a soaking wet mole emerged from the moss by Hector's foot. "Forgive me for bothering you, large dragon, but you are flooding my hole." "I am so sorry," said Hector. "I'll find somewhere else to cry." "But why are you crying?" inquired the mole. "Because I want a red wagon," replied the dragon woefully. "All my life I've wanted a red wagon, but it's no use. I've searched everywhere, but not a soul makes wagons for dragons. So I cry a great deal, and when I'm not crying, I wish." "It seems strange," the mole said politely. "I've always thought of dragons as fierce beasts who spout fire and frighten everyone." "I'm not like that at all," the dragon assured him. "I'm friendly. I'm always so damp from crying I couldn't spout fire if I wanted to." He brushed away one last tear and stood up. "I must be going. There's a swamp I haven't searched yet." "I doubt if you'll find a red wagon in a swamp," the mole said. "Perhaps not," replied the dragon with a sniffle, "but one must never give up hope." And he lumbered off. "If you find your wagon, come back and let me know," the mole called after him. The dragon looked mournfully at him. "I won't find it," he said. Just as the moon cast its first light through the trees, the dragon returned to the redwood grove. He settled down with an unhappy sigh and called, "Mr. Mole, I'm back." The mole popped out of his hole. "Did you find the wagon?" he asked. "Of course not," said the dragon. "But one must never give up hope. Good night, Mr. Mole." Late that night, after Hector had been asleep for hours, a peculiar smell drifted through the forest. In his sleep, the dragon stirred, his nose twitched, his tail thumped, and then in an instant he was wide awake. Something was very wrong. In the clearing beyond the trees, a group of uneasy, worried animals had gathered, chattering loudly. "What's the matter?" he heard a sleepy squirrel ask. "Can't you smell it?" demanded a rabbit, trembling with fright. "Yes, I smell it, but what is it?" the squirrel asked. "It's a forest fire," a beaver blurted. A family of deer dashed past. One turned for an instant and cried, "Run! It's fire!" Hector could see that his eyes were wild with fear. "Run, run!" echoed a rabbit as she dashed away after the deer. Other animals quickly followed. A hawk landed in a nearby tree. "I have seen the fire," he reported. "It is still quite small, but the woods are dry and it is spreading fast. The forest is doomed." "We mustn't run away," argued a bear. "We must beat it out with branches." "No," insisted the hawk. "The forest is too dry. We need water." "But there is no water," said the bear sadly. "Everyone listen, please," squeaked the mole in his loudest voice. "I know a dragon who cries like a cloudburst. His tears are the biggest, wettest things you've ever seen. If we can get him to cry over the fire, we can put it out." "Where can we find this dragon?" demanded the bear. The mole peered toward the redwood grove. "Right over there." "Dragon, are you in there?" a bear called out. "Here I am," Hector replied shyly. He walked toward the animals. "Help us put out the fire," the animals begged. "Please." "I would like to help," Hector said timidly, "but I am horribly afraid of fire. I'd be too frightened to cry." "What? A dragon afraid of fire?" hissed a snake. "I'm afraid of all sorts of things," Hector said dejectedly. "Please, large dragon," the mole pleaded, "won't you at least try? I'll go with you." "I'll try," Hector agreed in a quivering voice, "but I'm scared." With the mole perched snugly between his ears, Hector set out to find the fire. It wasn't difficult, for as they drew closer, they saw huge plumes of smoke rising into the air. "The fire is in the valley at the base of the mountain," the mole cried excitedly. "That's wonderful! You can cry over the edge of the cliff and put it out." They edged fearfully to the side of the cliff and looked down into a red-hot swirl of curling flames. Great heat and choking smoke surrounded them. "Now," said the mole, "cry! Oh, dragon, please cry!" "I can't," wailed the dragon. "I'm too frightened." The mole thought for a moment and then leaned into the dragon's ear. "Think of your wagon," he said. "Just think of a shiny red wagon." "I haven't got a wagon," Hector protested, wailing loudly. "You haven't?" the mole pretended surprise. "What a shame! Every dragon should have a wagon." "I've been saying that for years," the dragon whimpered, "but they don't make wagons for dragons." A great round tear formed in his eye. It rolled slowly down the long incline of his nose and dropped over the cliff into the fire. A small mass of flame sizzled and grew dark. The tears flowed freely now as the dragon hung his head over the cliff and wept. "Oh, my red wagon," Hector sobbed. "It is very sad," the mole agreed. "Walk over this way and tell me more about it." He guided the dragon toward a section of cliff where the flames still leaped high. Almost blinded by tears and overcome by woe, the dragon stumbled to the edge of the cliff, leaned over, and cried pitifully. Tears the size of footballs cascaded into the blaze. Hector told the mole of his travels throughout the world in search of a wagon. As he cried, the air grew cooler and clearer until at last the smoke had vanished and the last lick of flame had been drowned. "You've done it, dragon," the mole shouted. "The fire is out." Startled, the dragon brushed away his tears and looked down. In the wet, charred valley, not even the smallest flame remained. All the animals of the forest had crept as close as they dared to watch. Now they ran to congratulate Hector. "Thank you, dragon," they chorused gratefully. "Thank you." "It was nothing," Hector replied modestly. "I was in the mood for a good cry." He retreated as quickly as he could from the circle of animals thanking and praising him and returned quietly to the redwood grove where he fell asleep. For the first time in years, he forgot to make his 77 wishes. When he awoke the next morning, instead of hurrying off into the forest to search for his wagon, Hector lay quite still and thought about the previous night. Perhaps, he thought, I should give up wandering about the world and settle down in this forest with these fine, friendly animals. Yes, he decided, that's what I'll do. He jumped up to find the mole and tell him of his decision. But the mole's hole was empty. Hector looked for the squirrels and rabbits, but none were to be seen. The forest seemed deserted. The dragon spent an entire day roaming the forest and did not find one animal to talk to. It was almost as though they were avoiding him. Long after sundown, Hector trudged back to the mole's hole. No one answered his call. Hector felt as though he might cry. "Perhaps they're angry at me," he said gloomily, sinking down beneath a tree, "though I can't imagine why." He curled up in a tight, miserable ball. "I might as well go to sleep," he said, "and tomorrow I'll go on my way again, searching for my wagon." But for the second night in a row, he didn't make his 77 wishes. The sun was just coming over the hill when Hector opened his eyes. Something was tickling his ear. To his surprise, he found the mole seated on his head. All around him he heard excited chirping. The trees were filled with birds and squirrels, all watching him and chattering. "Good morning," the mole said casually. "You aren't angry?" Hector asked in amazement. "Whatever for?" the mole asked. "Everyone disappeared," Hector said. "You all avoided me." "Oh, that," replied the mole. "Yes, well, we've been quite busy." He smiled. "There's something over here I think you should see." He pointed toward the clearing through the trees. Hector caught a gleam from something bright. "Not another fire!" he cried. "No," said the mole, "nothing like that. Let's go and see." So the dragon and the mole made their way to the clearing. The animals lined the path and watched. Hector glanced at them and then looked into the clearing. There stood a huge, shiny, beautiful red wagon with the words "Dragon's Wagon" carefully lettered on both sides. "This is our way of saying thank you," the mole said. "My wagon!" Hector gasped. "Where did you—" "It was simple," the mole grinned. "The beavers sawed the lumber. The pack rats found wheels, nails, and paint. The bears drove in the nails, and the squirrels used their tails as paintbrushes. Do you like it?" "Like it?" Hector crowed. "I had almost given up hope." "One must never give up hope," the mole said with a chuckle. The end. I hope you like that story just as much as I do. I love you. We'll see you soon, I hope. One must never give up hope. Bye-bye.